The courtroom fell as silent as a tomb, the only sounds the faint buzz of cameras and the crowd's rapid breaths. Sergeant Quentin Drake think Rambo in a uniform strode forward, his eyes like predator lasers. He was famous for his gentle approach and punch, and you're out so no one dared stand in his way. But today, his target wasn't some run-of-the-mill criminal. It was Zariah Monroe, a poised, impeccably dressed black woman sitting tall like a queen among the onlookers. Zariah didn't flinch. Her dress was flawless, her gaze razor-sharp, as if daring Drake's hero act to crack. You could almost hear her thinking, "Just wait, you're in for a show." The gallery fidgeted, whispering as if they were tuning in for the day's viral clip. The judge's verdict rang out, tension spiking, and Drake immediately unleashed a kick that sounded like a starter pistol. He wasn't just aiming at her legs, he was declaring war on every ounce of empathy in the room. Gasps erupted like snare drums. Dust glittered in the harsh sunlight streaming through high windows, each mote hanging frozen in midair. Blood bloomed on Zariah's crisp white blouse, the precise splash of red begging to go straight to everyone's social feed. In that slowed-down instant, she remained unmoved, curling her lips into a knowing smile as if to say, "Oh, honey, you're in way over your head." That smile rattled Drake's confidence. His chestnuts, a billboard of brute strength, suddenly felt hollow. He realized he wasn't a super cop. He was a big kid playing dress-up on the wrong stage. The rest of the squad, their tough guy aura deflated, could only muster awkward shifts in their seats. Without a word, Zariah had turned the violence into a sneering rebuke that stung harder than any punch. Just then, a voice whispered from the back, "She's not someone you mess with." Now the entire courtroom felt like they were waiting for the like button on the greatest action comedy mashup ever filmed. Zariah's calm, even after that sucker punch, was the real stunt-no booming soundtrack needed. The audience knew this wasn't over. It was only the opening act of a showdown involving brawn, brains, and a serious dose of style. The courtroom remained deathly still after Zariah's slow-motion bomb went off. Not a single scream, she simply brushed the streak of blood from her lip with the back of her hand, her calm like an impending tsunami. That kick, it turned out, was only the opening salvo in a more vicious battle of wits. Zariah rose deliberately, each step counting down to justice's moment of reckoning. Every gaze shifted from shock to expectation, from frozen disbelief to breathless suspense. The room, thick with tension, ready to explode. "Drake," her voice rang out, measured yet lethal, each syllable like a blade striking the rusted shield of the sergeant's pride. "Do you remember my sister?" The word sister carried the weight of an unspoken history. A young black woman, innocent, felled by police boots, with no explanation. Drake went rigid, his once impervious confidence shattered. In its place stood the dark specter of racist violence, etched across his face. For a heartbeat, the past flooded back. Zariah's sister laughing under traffic lights, never racing, never armed, just out for a stroll, and then detained on suspicion, and gone. That kick at Zariah was proof the system's story hadn't changed. It was a reminder. This is the true statement of how injustice operates. The courtroom trembled. The defense attorney gaped, ready to rise but hushed by a lump in his throat. A child in the back row watched Zariah with wide-eyed admiration. "She doesn't have to shout, she's shaking up the whole room." A suppressed chuckle rippled through. "Maybe we need a black officer hotline to handle this." The judge rapped his gavel, voice low. "Quiet! We will hear Zariah's testimony." Zariah nodded once and strode to the witness stand, her posture straighter than a soldier's at attention. She cleared her throat, her words drilling into everyone's conscience. "This violence isn't an accident. It's the root of prejudice, where power is conferred by skin color, not by law." Drake trembled, swallowing fury. The squad of officers behind him backed away, realizing they weren't safeguarding justice, they were shielding its bloody bootprint. Zariah didn't need to shout. Her silent defiance was the deadliest blow of all. In that heartbeat of silence, Sergeant Drake visibly shrank, his swagger collapsing into jittery restraint. The arrogant curl of his lip trembled like a king whose crown suddenly felt too heavy. Zariah let that moment linger, then spoke in a voice so calm it cut through the tension like ice. You think that kick was power, Drake? Number. It was the biggest mistake of your life. A murmur rippled through the gallery. She's no ordinary victim. Indeed, Zariah was far more than a bruised bystander. She was Cheyenne Monroe, the sister of a young black woman whose life was snuffed out under a police cruiser's tires. No one in that courtroom yet guessed her true identity, but the electricity in the air whispered legend. Here stood the living embodiment of every baseless suspect who'd vanished into the system's shadows. Drake tried to clear his throat, staging a cough that sounded more like a hiccup of shame. He began, but Zariah raised a hand, palm forward, halting him like a traffic officer mid-shout. Save it, she said. I'm not here for excuses or apologies. I'm here to unmask a system that prizes skin color over human life. From the back row, a young attorney leaned forward and quipped under his breath. She's dropping truth grenades and no one asked for a defusal kit. Laughter flickered, quick and nervous, rippling through the crowd. Even the bailiffs shifted uneasily, cuffs jingling, as if drawn into her gravity. Zariah stepped down from the stand, stalking toward the defense table like a detective closing in. Her heels clicked an echo of every pounding heart in the room. You call yourself a protector, she continued, voice rising. But you're nothing more than a bully in uniform. You unleash violence on my people, then pretend it's justice. You've traded your badge for a weapon against the very community you swore to serve. Drake's face went ashen. He glared at her, nostrils flaring, but his words died mid-curse. He was caught in her Glareno fortress of privilege, could withstand that leveled stare. You could almost see the data points shatter in his mind. Reports of unrest, statistics of racial stops, body cam footage buried in digital vaults. Zariah turned to the jury, eyes blazing. This isn't one bad apple, she said. It's an orchard that's rooted in fear and watered with bias. If we don't pull it out by the roots, it will keep poisoning our communities. A hush fell again, but this time it felt like a reckoning. The judge leaned forward, interest peaked, as Zariah's final words trailed off into the stillness. In that pregnant pause, everyone understood. Her fight was far from personal, it was a battle for every silenced voice. And make no mistake, she was just getting started. Just as the courtroom was reeling, Seraphine Cole, human rights attorney extraordinaire and whispered legend in legal circles, rose without warning. Her heels clipped across the marble floor, each step a war drum. Your Honor, she announced, voice crisp as a police whistle. We have additional evidence to submit. From a leather satchel she produced stacks of complaint forms, dozens upon dozens each. One a testament to Sergeant Drake's unchecked pattern of abuse, racial profiling, and brutality. Files once buried in dusty drawers now thundered into the light like an army of cicadas crying for justice. The judge looked up, eyebrows knitting into a tapestry of concern. He gestured for the bailiff to hand over the documents. Miss Cole, he said, tone grave, you realize you're opening a very old wound. Seraphine smiled, just a flicker, like lightning teasing through storm clouds. Precisely, Your Honor. These wounds have festered long enough. As the bailiff arranged the stacks on the bench, the gallery went silent in unusual hush, not out of decorum, but sheer astonishment. Former admirers of Drake's tough guy brand found their mouths agape. A juror leaned to her neighbor, whispering, who knew a paper cut could hurt so much? Even Drake's squad shifted uncomfortably, cuffs at their hips chiming like tiny alarm bells. Seraphine swept her gaze across the room. Each of these complaints tells the same story, she said, voice measured but fierce. A black driver pulled over for no reason walking while black flagged as suspicious. A teenager assaulted for jaywalking charges, dropped only after public outrage. Hardened citizens beaten in their own homes. She paused, letting the weight settle. This is not random misconduct. It is systemic oppression wearing a badge. Drake's jaw clenched so tight you'd think he could crack walnuts. He opened his mouth, perhaps to sputter a denial, but no sound came. Instead, his face turned the color of old asphalt. Then Seraphine leaned forward, lowering her voice so every listener strained to hear. You, Sergeant Drake, embody a meme we all dread, when you're supposed to serve and protect, but end up persecuting the people you swore to defend. A smattering of nervous laughter rippled through the room, an ironic chorus for the gravity of her point. The judge closed his eyes momentarily, weighing the moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, firm, resolute. The court will accept these complaints into evidence and schedule a full inquiry into Sergeant Drake's conduct. This hearing is adjourned. His gavel cracked like a thunderclap. As the judge left the bench, Seraphine gave Zariah a brief nod. Comrades in arms. Zariah, seated with dignified calm, offered Seraphine a half-smile that spoke of battles won and those yet to come. Outside the courtroom doors, cameras flashed, ready to catch the fall of a badge that had long shielded injustice under the guise of law. And in that moment, everyone knew this was no mere footnote, it was a seismic shift. The weight of Seraphine's documents and testimony slammed a steel noose around Sergeant Drake's neck. The courtroom, once a mere stage for formalities, had transformed into a gladiatorial arena of conscience. Every spectator there wasn't just watching, they were co-conspirators in that silence. Complicit unless they spoke up. Zariah sat at the center, a living emblem of inner strength, proving that justice is more than empty. Retaliates, the crushing force that demands real change. Prosecutors exchanged glances, sharpened by newfound purpose, their stiff legal pads rattling as they prepared to throw every charge at Drake. Even the defense attorney's confident smirk had faded, replaced by a twitching unease. Jurors leaned forward, eyes flickering between Zariah's steady gaze and the mountain of affidavits piling on the bench. You could almost see the scales of justice tipping under the storm of evidence. Zariah rose again, shoulders squared like an avenging hero. "This isn't about one man's momentary lapse," she declared, her voice reverberating off the marble pillars. "It's about an entire institution that trains its officers to see dread instead of dignity." Her words struck like a drumbeat, each echo igniting a spark of recognition in the hearts of those who'd never paused to question the cost of order. A prosecutora woman who'd once chased crime scenes with adrenaline-fueled zeal nodded grimly, as though realizing only now the true victims they'd all overlooked. The defense lawyer, accustomed to ritualistic appeals, seemed to grasp that, beyond a reasonable doubt, was no longer just a phrase. It was a call to reckon with decades of prejudice. Drake's face turned ashen, sweat beaded at his temples. He swallowed hard, as though trying to choke back the bitter truth that he'd become the poster boy for police racism. The gallery stirred, grandmothers, drag queens, clergy members who'd come to watch a routine hearing but now sat captivated by a reckoning too potent to ignore. "Is this really who we are?" one spectator whispered. Another shook her head, voice low, "We need more than words." Zariah's lips curled into a steely smile. "We've all knelt before pain today," she said, "and now we must rise for justice." In that golden moment, the court was stripped bare of bureaucratic indifference. The gavelance, a symbol of hollow authority, now felt like a promise that change would no longer be optional. As she sat, Zariah locked eyes with Drake, one last timeno malice, just unwavering resolve. Around them, every legalist, every bystander, knew it too. This was the turning point. From here on, there would be no hiding behind badges, only accountability. When Seraphine rose again, files and tablet in hand, the courtroom braced for impact, like a dam finally bursting. "Your Honor," she said crisply, "I move to introduce internal police evidence, body cam recordings, confidential emails, and witness statements from within the precinct." The judge's gavel hovered mid-air as every jaw dropped. This wasn't a cameo appearance of misconduct, it was a full-blown exposé. The bailiff shuffled forward, arms piled with an avalanche of printouts. A ripple of nervous chuckles ran through the gallery. Surely, no one had ever seen so many confidential memos in one place outside a corporate scandal. Drake's eyes darted toward the bench, as if those documents might sprout legs and carry him off. The judge cleared his throat, eyes steely. "I've seen routine police logs, Miss Cole," he said. "But this is different. We will hear every witness and view every recording." His words landed like a thunderclap. Even the drab courtroom walls seemed to lean in. Zariah, seated at the front, remained statuesquino flinch, no small sigh. She was the calm at the eye of a storm, allowing Seraphine and their team to flip the narrative. Justice, she knew, was not a rigid script but a living force that swayed when hearts were moved. The first tape whirred to life, squeaky precinct radios calling for backup on a black kid walking too fast. The room recoiled at the casual disdain for innocent lives. Next, an email. Let's keep these reports in File 13, we don't need more paperwork. Even the stenographer paused mid-stroke, processing the raw confession of cover-ups. Then came the star witness, Officer Jenkins, formerly silent accomplice, sworn in with shaking hands. I saw Sergeant Drake order a traffic stop on Miss Monroe's sister, Jenkins stammered. He said, "We don't need another perp on our streets, especially not one of her kind." A hush spread so deep you could hear the judge's leather robe rustle. A juror once so stiff he could pass for a bust muttered, "Well, color me enlightened." Even the defense attorney looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Seraphine closed her folder with a soft snap. "Your Honor, this is not isolated misconduct. It's institutional racism codified in memos and radios. We ask you to see the full picture." The judge nodded, solemn. "It's time for this court to face the entire film reel." As Jenkins stepped down, the gavel finally descended. The room exhaled, shaken but awakened. Zariah caught Seraphine's eye and offered the tiniest, triumphant smile. The law had bent toward justice tonight and no badge could hold it back. The hearing stretched into an unbroken marathon of testimony. Zariah and Seraphine moved like a lethal tag team. Zariah pressing the emotional front with unwavering resolve, Seraphine hammering home the facts with precise logic. It was a legal symphony of pressure and proof, and every note struck at the heart of systemic racism. First up was Marisol Hernandez, a former victim whose trembling voice cut through the hush. "He slammed me face first onto the hood of my own car because I looked suspicious," she recalled, wincing as if the pain still scorched her. Gasps punctuated her every word, as if the courtroom itself inhaled and held its breath. Next came Officer Simon Patel, once Drake's partner on the beat. He cleared his throat, nervously flicking his badge. "I was told to bury my report," he confessed. "I saw him plant evidence on a teenager, and if I spoke up, they warned me I'd be next." A dry laugh escaped him, half in bitterness, half in disbelief. Funny how protect and serve really means obey and cover up. Then it was 10-year-old Jamal Thompson's turn. The courtroom went still as he climbed onto the witness stand. Huge eyes, a stuttered, "Sir," and then the truth. "I saw him point his flashlight at my mom and call her lighting up the night. He shoved her into a wall for spilling coffee." A child's simple description of brutality landed like a meteor strike. You could almost hear the walls creak under the weight of collective shame. Outside the courthouse, the roar of protest swelled. Signs reading, "Stop Police Terror" and "Black Lives Matter" turned the quiet precinct into a marching ground. Social media lit up like a Christmas tree in July live streams, hashtags, viral posts. Every moment was broadcast, every injustice replayed. The courtroom was no longer a cloistered ivory tower. It had become the nation's epicenter of moral judgment. Back inside, Seraphine strode to the bench, whispering, "Your Honor, we've only scratched the surface." She slid an iPad across the desk dashcam footage, text threads, a web of collusion mapped out in pixels. The judge's eyes widened. "We will recess for a full review of these materials," he declared, voice thunderous. Zariah sat back down, chest heaving with controlled triumph. Drake, pale and defeated, could only watch as the walls of his impunity crumbled. In that chamber, the voices of the marginalized had formed a deluge so powerful it could not be swept away. Tonight, the courthouse wasn't just dispensing verdicts, it was channeling a nationwide reckoning, and no badge could hold back that flood. Stepping out into the late afternoon sun, Zariah was met by a roar so loud it might have registered on the Richter scale. Protesters surged forward, lifting her onto their shoulders as though she were the maiden in their living allegory of justice. Cameras flashed like lightning, and reporters jostled for position. One breathless anchor leaned into her mic. "Miss Monroe, now that the courthouse has heard your story, do you believe justice has finally awakened?" Zariah offered a small, wry, Smoleno-booming speech required. The image said it all. Behind her, banners snapped in the wind. "End police terror" and "Transparency now." Someone handed Zariah a coffee half, spilled from the march, prompting a chuckle as she wiped the stain from her blouse. Perfect, she quipped. Makes the red a little more authentic. Social media lit up in real time. Justice Awake trended. Memes of Zariah's blood, red lip against white fabric circulated, and every network played her walk of triumph on loop. Reporters traded juicy tidbits. An insider tells me the chief of police has ordered emergency bias training starting Monday. Another countered. Don't hold your breath, those modules are penned by the same folks who scripted Active Shooter Response 101. The irony wasn't lost on the crowd, who jeered good-naturedly at the notion of cops teaching themselves to stop beating civilians. Meanwhile, City Hall spokespeople emerged, polishing press releases that read like perfunctory medieval absolutions. We condemn all excessive force and reaffirm our commitment to unbiased policing. One staffer rolled her eyes as she handed out pre-printed "Reform Now" placards complete with the department logo, because nothing says sincerity like branded merchandise. Zariah raised an eyebrow, mouthing to her friend, "Next, they'll sell us justice hoodies." As dusk fell, Zariah's silhouette blood-red streak, blouse unbowed etched itself into every television screen. She climbed onto a makeshift stage-in overturned Cratiand. The crowd hushed. No words were needed. Every cheer and every tear spoke volumes. In that moment, she was more than a survivor. She was the living emblem of a movement demanding accountability and clarity in the blue line's darkest corners. And so, under floodlights and fervent shouts, the next chapter began. Calls for independent oversight boards, civilian review panels, a full overhaul of training curricula. Zariah stood at the epicenter, a quiet force of nature whose presence proved that when a single voice rises against systemic prejudice, even the hardest badge can't muffle the call for justice. Over the next week, the momentum from the courthouse spilled into every corner of the city. Civil rights organizations partnered with legal aid clinics to shepherd victims of police violence through the labyrinth of claims and compensation. At the annual Justice Now conference, Zariah took the Stagino velvet rope, no fancy podium, just a single spotlight and a mic. "Violence is never the solution," she declared, voice ringing clear. "It's the problem. If your first instinct is to punch, you've already lost the argument." Seraphine Cole chaired a blisteringly frank online panel, titled, "Bias in Blue, Unlearning Prejudice in the Ranks." Behind her screen, slide after slide displayed case studies and Best Practice Plus, a cheeky meme of a cartoon cop reading "Implicit Bias for Dummies." One attendee asked in chat, "Do we really need a workshop to teach kindness?" Seraphine quipped back, "Apparently, yes, because some folks treat compassion as an optional extra." The chat erupted in supportive emojis. Together, Zariah and Seraphine wove a program of live workshops, communication exercises for teens, empathy drills for precinct officers, and interfaith dialogues at local houses of worship. At Jefferson High, Zariah led a Walk in My Shoes exercise. Students swapped shoes and shared stories of feeling judged by appearances. The principal, a stern woman named Mrs. Caldwell, admitted afterward, "I thought it was corny, but watching them open up, wow. I'm revising the student handbook to include empathy training." Meanwhile, Sergeant Jenkinson Drake's reluctant partner joined Seraphine for a roundtable at the 5th Precinct. He confessed, "I never realized my backup calls added fuel to the fire." Seraphine handed him a crisp workshop agenda. "Now you'll know exactly how to back up your community instead." By midweek, local politicians found themselves on the defensive. Councilman Ortiz, famous for getting into shouting matches with constituents, quietly circulated a revised ordinance mandating civilian oversight boards. "I mean, if the kids at Jefferson can learn empathy, so can we," he muttered, checking his phone for live tweets. At the Interfaith Mosque seminar, Rabbi Klein and Imam Hassan co-led Justice Through Dialogue, modeling how religious leaders and police commanders could coordinate on conflict de-escalation. One police captain joked, "Next we'll be baking challah side by side." Laughter rippled through the room, bridging centuries of mistrust in a single moment of shared humanity. By Friday, the phrase, "justice isn't optional," was emblazoned on banners, beer koozies, and even eco-friendly tote bags. Clerks at City Hall stocked up, chuckling, "Our souvenir sales never looked so righteous." Energy from those first courtroom revelations had fractured the status quo. Policies shifted, training budgets ballooned, and even the police union grudgingly endorsed monthly bias workshops. Where once a badge meant immunity, now it meant accountability, and change, it seemed, was truly in session. Roughly 3 months after that landmark trial, Sergeant Drake found himself under formal investigation by the newly formed Independent Policing Oversight Commission and stripped of his badge. The commission, empowered by public outcry and legislative backing, enacted sweeping reforms: zero tolerance for unwarranted force, mandatory de-escalation protocols, and civilian review panels with real power to suspend or dismiss officers. In the halls of the Justice Department, Seraphine Cole accepted a prestigious Champion of Justice award. With her characteristic grace, she used her acceptance speech to announce the launch of her new legal support center for victims of police violence, an office dedicated to representing those who'd once feared speaking out. Survivors shouldn't face the courtroom alone, she reminded the audience. They deserve both counsel and compassion. Meanwhile, Zariah Monroe channeled her sister's memory into the Cheyenne Monroe Memorial Scholarship Fund, providing college grants to children of victims and families affected by police brutality. In a converted warehouse gallery, she curated an art exhibition titled Shadows and Lights, showcasing paintings, sculptures, and photographs by survivors and their communities. Each piece was a raw testament to pain, resilience, and hope. One haunting series of portraits, faces half hidden by police tape, was so powerful it prompted the city council to dedicate funds for permanent public display. At the exhibit's opening, Zariah spoke softly into the microphone. "These works remind us that justice is more than a verdict. It's the daily work of protecting those who cannot protect themselves, of transforming hearts, and of reshaping institutions once built on silence." That night, Seraphine and Zariah stood side by side beneath the gallery's spotlight, two women whose partnership had shifted the very foundations of law enforcement in their city. They watched as families embraced, artists wept with relief, and young activists sketched plans for community centers, confident that change was no longer a fleeting promise, but an enduring reality. The story didn't end there. Across town, precincts held community forums, schools integrated empathy training into their curricula. Even the police academy rewrote its use of force manual. Statues of transparency and accountability rose where apathy once reigned. 3 months later, the badge hadn't just been taken from one manite, had been redefined. Justice, they realized, isn't confined to a judge's gavel. It thrives in every legal aid clinic, every scholarship awarded, every mural painted on formerly blank walls. In the end, the real verdict was this: though the trial concluded, the movement for compassion and accountability had only just begun. And in its wake, the city, and perhaps the nation, loomed on the cusp of a new era, one where the powerless might finally find their voice, and the powerful their conscience. A full year had passed since Zariah Monroe's red-stained blouse became the rallying flag of reform. From the vantage point of today, the city looked almost unrecognizable. Data from the Independent Oversight Commission showed a 45% drop in use of force incidents. Complaints of racial profiling declined by 1/3. Every precinct now featured community care units, teams of officers trained in de-escalation, mental health response, and radically active listening. At the heart of the change was Police Chief Martina Reyes, herself a woman of color who rose through the ranks by quietly challenging the old guard. In her first public address broadcast live on local TV, she quipped, "Turns out empathy isn't just a soft skill." The line went viral. Under her leadership, every cadet's first day included a classroom session with Seraphine Cole, who by now had expanded her legal support center into 3 borough-wide offices. "Law isn't just rules," Seraphine reminded recruits. "It's respect, first and foremost." Zariah's Cheyenne Monroe Memorial Scholarship Fund had blossomed into a full nonprofit. Over 50 students received tuition grants this semester alone. At the annual Shadows and Lights Arts Gala, a marquee city event survivor, artists unveiled murals on police-owned walls, transforming reminders of past violence into vibrant tributes to resilience. One mural, titled Bloom Through the Brass, depicted a cherry blossom tree growing through a riot shield. Passers-by paused, phones out, but instead of selfies, they left post-it notes of solidarity. Yet the transformation wasn't without bumps. Last spring, a rookie officer with little training slipped back into old habit-sharsh handcuffs, flared anger, and a video surfaced. The community's response was swift, clear, the bench hearing within 48 hours, mandatory retraining, and the officer's permanent transfer to a social work liaison role. No grand cover-up this time, just an apology, accountability, and a plan to do better. In City Hall, Councilman Ordizance, the man who jokingly stocked reform tote bags, introduced the Living Accountability Act, requiring annual public forums where citizens could rate their precinct's performance. The first hearing was packed, microphones lined up like soldiers. A grandmother took the stand and simply said, "I see you now, and I feel safe." The applause lasted a full minute. One evening, Zariah and Seraphine met at the original courtroom steps. The marble felt colder, the building quieter, without protests. Zariah smiled at Seraphine and said, "Remember when we thought one trial could only change so much?" Seraphine laughed, tapping her badge-shaped lapel pin. "That trial changed everything. It gave us the courage to keep pushing." Oh. They stood in companionable silence, watching editorial cartoonists sketch their silhouettes on the plaza's big screens. One drew Zariah wearing angel wings over combat boots. The next sketched Seraphine wielding a pen like a sword. It was a fitting tribute. A city reforged by two women who proved that lasting justice isn't served by a single verdict, it's built day by day, heart by heart, year by year.